Well, I learned my lesson, but my breasts are never coming back. And it's like, it's a much more profound loss than I have ever, like, it's a worse mistake than I've ever made in my life ever before. I absolutely felt like my life was ruined.
Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I have a very special interview for you guys, very special video today. Today I'm interviewing an awesome young woman named Grace, who is recently a feature on CBS's 60 Minutes. It's an episode all about detransitioners because Grace is a female to male, back to female detransitioner. Now you guys know that detransition is a bit of a taboo topic. It's one that when you bring it up, you do get a lot of backlash. 60 Minutes is getting a lot of backlash. Grace is getting a lot of backlash. I will get it, but that's okay. What's new? There's a lot of attempts at censoring this topic, which actually just makes me want to talk about it more. Grace's story is one that is inspiring, powerful, heartbreaking, emotional, and worthy of being heard. Just a quick reminder, if you have any hateful or negative comments that you are inspired to write toward Grace, just go ahead and send them towards me. Grace has been through a lot. She's very brave for telling her story. She's getting a lot of backlash from the mainstream media. So I encourage you guys, my supporters, to show her the love that she's not getting from other trans influencers and the mainstream. But with all that being said, I will now shut up. We'll get to the interview with Grace, talking all about detransitioning, how to avoid ending up having regrets like her, and what needs to happen going forward. Let's go. And today we're interviewing someone who is very famous out of nowhere all of a sudden. Her name is Grace, and you were recently featured on an episode of 60 Minutes on CBS. And it was an episode that I was shocked they allowed to air, which was on detransitioners, huge taboo topic in the trans community. So first of all, maybe just introduce yourself and maybe say how you got on 60 Minutes in the first place.
Yeah, so my name is Grace. Let's see, I think I was found for 60 Minutes based on my Twitter presence. I started tweeting under the name Hormone Hangover about my detransition, and just started getting just a few followers here and there. And then I ended up being contacted about this segment, and it just aired. So it's totally wild.
Right. So you are a female to male and then back to female detransitioner. And first of all, what does it feel like to have the world kind of attacking you for even telling your story and the other detransitioners that were interviewed? Because if there's one thing among the list of things that the trans community typically doesn't like spoken about, detransitioners is pretty high on the list. So what do you make of the backlash for you simply telling what happened to you?
I think it's a little ridiculous. I don't know, the extreme reaction of like, not just like outrage at detransitioners, even being shown at all on national TV feels, it feels really unfair. For the one part, it feels like, you know, the trans community, like I used to be part of the trans community, and I guess I sort of still consider myself part of it. Like I definitely have had a lot of trans experiences. I can relate to a lot of things that I think trans people have gone through. So I guess it hurts my feelings a little bit. But on the other hand, I also think that it is a little bit of an immature reaction, especially from some like figureheads. And the reason I feel that way is because I think that like not being able to deal with the complexities of transition and not being able to deal with the fact that it's like, you know, pretty serious and like can sometimes not end up all sunshine and rainbows is like, I feel like people have trouble contending with that and being mature about that. So right. I was really grateful that that was aired, but yeah.
But I would really like you to, in this format, really go into like, because you removed your breasts.
Mm-hmm.
And you went on cross-sex hormones, which also has some permanent effects.
Yeah.
I would really like you to go into detail about like what it feels like to now be on the other side and realize that you made those permanent decisions and what it's like to live with that now.
It's really a strange feeling. It feels very sad and kind of tragic. It's like has this tragic feeling where I'm like, well, I learned my lesson, but my breasts are never coming back. And it's like, it's a much more profound loss than I have ever like, it's a worse mistake than I've ever made in my life ever before. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. You know, it's interesting because while we share the experiences of, you know, going through transition, it's like, it's so emotional for me to hear that, because as someone who has also gone through surgeries and things that have benefited me so greatly and that have really made me feel like the best of what I can be as a person, mm-hmm. I can only imagine looking at my breasts or my body or anything else I've changed with regret. And I can't even pretend to like imagine what that trauma feels like. I mean, is it traumatic?
I don't know. I don't really know what that word means anymore. I feel like people throw it around a lot.
True.
But I mean, it affected me. It affected me extremely deeply. I absolutely felt like my life was ruined for like several years, and I still experience a lot of pain and like regret about it pretty much every day. So yeah, it's painful. It's very painful.
Right. And other than surgery, and keep in mind, anything you don't want to say, like, just tell me to shut up. But with the cross-sex hormones, some changes are reversible, mm-hmm. and some are not. Are there any irreversible effects that you have noticed? And I'm only asking not because I'm trying to treat this like some, give me all the details, but it's like, there are people really going through this, and there are people that don't understand that these things have aspects to them that are very permanent. So yeah.
Yeah. Good question. So my voice is deeper. I've been told my voice does not sound very deep, but it used to be higher. I used to be very like bubblegum Powerpuff Girls style talker. I have more body hair than I used to. I have a little bit of like a mustache and some face fuzz that I shave sometime. It's not too bad. And I think it's possible my face got a little more angular and bony, but I have a pretty square head, so it's really hard to say where that comes in. But you know, the shape of my body, like the testosterone, you know, it made me like skinnier and leaner and muscular, and that all kind of went away, and I became more soft and squishy again. So some things faded away pretty fast.
Right. Well, that's good. There was an interesting moment in the 60 Minutes episode, which, by the way, I do encourage people to watch that after this, and I think you'll get even more context for this, where Leslie Stahl asked you, was part of the reason you transitioned because you had this inherent feeling that men have it easier in life? And you said yes. And I was wondering if you could elaborate on that.
Oh, man. I really... Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because I saw some people responding to that. I think I was very much in a frame of mind that was very focused on like what I would call like the Tumblr perspective of things, like very Tumblr feminist, a lot of like feminist analysis, a lot of stuff like this. And I think that kind of analysis is very valuable. But I see that the problem in my thinking was, one, like kind of oversimplifying everything in life through that lens of analysis. Like I was like, oh, like women have these problems. And I sort of started having this idealized view of life as a man. And I think it was like just like a maladaptive mechanism to be like, things could be easier if I just could do this.
I think that it's only a logical conclusion that some people who, like you said, do look at the world and life and society through that particular lens would come to the conclusion that, well, if men are privileged or benefit from things in a different way, that like, maybe I could just be a man. And it seems maybe, you know, crazy to some people listening, but it doesn't seem, you know, that far-fetched that some people would fall into that. And, you know, unfortunately, you're one of them. I'm not saying that was the entire reason you transitioned, because clearly there's a lot more nuance to it. But that makes sense to me. So I've made this observation of the detrans community because it really is a community now. There are Reddit pages with tens of thousands of members who claim to have experienced this. There are people on YouTube with now like growing massive audiences talking about this experience. And I can't help but notice, and there's not data to back this up, it's just you have to see the community to know it. It is a majority biological females. Of course, there are male to female trans people like myself that do tell their stories of detransition, and those are, you know, important to hear as well. But I can't help but notice it's a lot of biological females. Do you agree with that? And why do you think that is? Have you thought about that at all?
I have definitely noticed that the presence is mostly like a lot of female like certainly majority female detransitioners. I think everyone struggles, like it can struggle profoundly with body issues. I think women may be more likely to locate suffering and take out forms of pain and suffering like on their bodies is one completely amateur psychological thought I have.
I think there's something to that though. I think that, you know, everyone is plagued with some form of body issues, whether you're a man who's in the gym trying to get bigger or a woman who wants to be smaller or bigger in certain places or whatever. But there is a particular pressure young girls are under in regards to their body that's only made worse by social media. And I think you're right about that.
Yeah. I don't mean to minimize like any body dysmorphia that like male people go through, because I think it can be really painful and real for anyone, but just, you know, on average, on a population level. Essentially I think I hear a lot of people expressing dysphoria around things that are vulnerable, that can like feel vulnerable about having a female body in general. Like, you know, you can become pregnant. Like that's very, you know, that can be a wonderful thing, but that also is, I think, of profound vulnerability.
Yeah. And breasts, you know, breasts are hypersexualized, and some, again, this is all speculation. There could be some people that are uncomfortable with the fact that people can see if they have breasts. You know, I think you're onto something. I've never even thought about that. And truthfully, when I asked you why there's more biological females, I hadn't even considered that, but that's such a good point. You mentioned in the 60 Minutes episode that diving deep into online trans communities you feel contributed to your decision to ultimately transition. And that's something that, you know, I'm in the probably unique position that I have received emails from just hundreds, if not thousands of detransitioners, because I don't want to say the only, because I'll be corrected, but I'm one of the only public trans people on YouTube and on my platforms that is supportive of you guys. And so people reach out and they really spill their guts. And that's such a common thread. Almost all of them say they just got way too deep in online trans communities. And if that's a problem, I don't really know what to do about that. You can't say that there can't be trans communities, but what is your experience with that?
I'm going to get in so much trouble for talking about this, because I know people, this was a criticism of the 60 Minutes piece, is people were saying like, YouTube does not make you trans. Like, this is not, you know, you can't say that these communities are making people trans. And I think framing it as like the communities are making people trans doesn't really make any sense to me either. Sorry, I'm like malfunctioning because
no, yeah, I see what you're saying. I don't think it's necessarily like these YouTubers are turning people trans. I don't think I've ever turned anyone trans, but I think that like if you're someone who's already in pain or suffering through something and you're seeking community and guidance and inspiration, and you're not really meant to be trans, but you stumble into these groups and you see these people that are making these transformations and becoming happy, that can be attractive to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and it's not, this is something I want to be really careful about, because I don't think that it's like, I'm not trying to say like people shouldn't share their experiences, because what if something, like, that's not it. But I think undeniably people who are like looking for answers can see that this is a path that's like a very like beautiful, in a way, it's like very beautiful to be like, I'm remaking myself. Like it feels very, it feels extremely transformative, which can be really tempting if you have a lot of like self-hate or you're not happy with you know, yourself. And it also is like taking control of your life and your body in a way. So all that stuff I think is really powerful to people, and you know, I think is part of the reason that it can also be really good for people to transition. But if you look at in online trans communities, there's a website called like amitransgender.net or something, and if you go to it, it just says yes and links to a bunch of essays being like, and here's all the reasons you can be trans without even realizing it. Like, so I think that is kind of emblematic of what I would consider some of the problems with online trans spaces, which is that I think they're very one-sided for the most part.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, you mentioned them being one-sided, and I don't think anything is more evident but that when you look at the reaction that social media in those spaces especially have reacted to the 60 Minutes episode. You know, people act as if there is some great harm being done to trans people by detransitioners getting their moment to say their story. And I think that it does a huge disservice when you only show one side. There's a trans activist, I believe his name is Chase Strangio, and he was tweeting that the 60 Minutes episode showed a limited angle because they didn't talk about happy transitioners, which first of all, they had multiple trans people interviewed in the medical field. They were examples of happy transitioners. If anyone needs one, hi, I'm right here. But it seems as if what the trans community sometimes fights for is a limited angle, because if you refuse to show that transition can be a mistake for some people, you're showing a limited angle. So it's that hypocrisy that I don't really understand. And I think that it only helps people. I mean, I try to put myself in the mindset of if I was maybe a little younger or not even younger, just ultimately confused and grappling with, do I transition? Do I not? Like any other life decision, I would want to hear both sides. I would want to hear someone like you saying, well, I thought this was the case, but it's not. And I would want to hear maybe someone like me who says this was the case and I made the right decision. And it's seeing the duality of it that is important. Mm-hmm. Do you agree?
Yeah. Yeah. I think representing like the full range of outcomes, including like regret and including people who are really happy, helps give people a more realistic understanding. I don't think any particular influencers are guilty of glamorizing it, but I think as a whole, the way that transition is discussed, people slip through the cracks. And I wanted to talk about slipping through the cracks because it's my opinion, as someone who has been treated by a variety of doctors in the trans medical field. And I've moved different places and had different doctors here and there. And I've had surgery in Texas, but hormones in California. Mm-hmm. I've met a lot of them. I think that there is a huge lack of consistency in the way that people are diagnosed or not diagnosed at all and then given hormones and surgery. And I can attest to this. I was not required any proof of therapy, any proof of having dysphoria, any proof of long-term living as a woman before I was given cross-sex hormones. It was probably the shortest doctor appointment of my life. I walked in and 10 minutes later, I had a prescription for estrogen. In my younger developing years, I was 20, but you're still developing at 20. And that was in California, but I had surgery in Texas, a red state. Maybe people will think there are more guidelines there. Didn't require anything. I just paid up and got it. So what do you think can change going forward? Or do you think anything needs to change about the way people are given? Because you said that you did all your transitioning in the course of a year. Mm-hmm. That's
wow.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, I have this group that I'm part of called GCCAN. It stands for Gender Care Consumers Advocacy Network, and it's with me and a couple other people who have like been through trans care, both trans and detrans. And so we've like thought about this a lot. And I think your point about people like being lost to follow-up and like moving around clinics, like this is kind of an unavoidable problem, at least to me, with like even just having detransition statistics or like follow-up statistics. Like, you know, I think a lot of doctors maybe just like don't know what happens to their patients after they leave. Like, you know, after you leave Texas and move to California, like you're still doing great. But, you know, maybe someone else leaves the clinic and maybe they have detransitioned. And I just don't think that most doctors know, which is understandable, but I think it creates a problem when you're going to claim like detransition is incredibly rare or something like that. Because it's like, well, I don't know that we know that.
And I have to respond to that because that's a huge argument. Like whenever I bring up detransition as someone who has done videos on this and talk about this often, like the main argument I hear from them is, well, it's so much more rare than happy transitioners, right? Like detransition is such a small amount of people. And my response to that is, okay, but trans people in general are so much more rare than cis people and people who aren't trans. Like if we're going to go by like, this is more common than that, it's like, okay, trans people in general make up like 0.001% of the population. That can't be an argument. Like, I don't think people who detransition are less valid because they're less common than happy transitioners. And as trans people, I think that we can't expect the world to care about our issues despite being such a minority when we refuse to care about detransitioner issues despite them being an even further minority, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's really well said. It's just because a group is small doesn't mean they're not super important. And certainly the experiences of any one person, like, you know, if you're a person who goes through transition and it changes your life for the better, then that's like, then your whole world is better. And if you're someone who goes through transition and is really hurt by it, then that's, you know,
right.
That's something you live with forever. So it's just really profoundly important. I also don't think that shoving detransitioners under the rug is fair. First of all, I don't think that's fair to ask. And second of all, I think this stuff is just good to talk about. I think we just need to be able to talk about complicated things with nuance and compassion.
Yes, I think that a topic so nuanced deserves a nuanced conversation. I find myself saying that all the time when it comes to this, when it comes to trans sports, children transitioning, detransitioners. Like none of this stuff is black and white. It all requires a nuanced take. And the good news is you injected a lot of nuance into it. There are people having this conversation. No, really, like, I mean, at the end of the day, this is a topic that is changing day by day and is influenced by the people, you know, involved in it and that are platformed, and you're one of them now. And it's valuable. It's valuable.
Well, thank you. Thank you for facilitating that and being kind of across the culture war boundary voice. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Well, listen, I'll let you go, but thank you so much for coming on. Everyone should definitely go follow Grace on Twitter, keep up with her. And again, let's all have nuanced conversations, please, please.
Sounds good.
You have a nice day, Grace.
Okay, you too. All right, bye-bye.